Samsara dava nalarida loka Shanaya karanya ganaganatvam Raptasya kalyana gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditya Madhya Manasora Sena Romancha Kampa Shutaranga Bhaja Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shri Vigrahara Dhananitya Nana Shingarata Mandira Majanado Yuktasya Bhaktam Shaniyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Chaturveda Shri Bhagavat Prasada Swadhana Triptan Haribhakta Sangam Kritaiva Triptim Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shri Radhika Madhavayora Para Madhurya Lila Guna Rupa Namnam Pratikshana Swadhanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Nikunjayuna Radhikali Siddhyai Yaya Libir Yuktira Pekshaniya Tatrati Daksharati Valabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Sakshadaret Vena Samasta Shastrer Uktastata Bhavyata Eva Sadvi Kintu Prabhuya Prayeva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasado Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutopi Yayam stuvam stasya yasyastri sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. 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 Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman. Jaya Goyanita Jaya Goyanita Jaya Goyanita Jaya Goyanita. Nita Gora Haribo 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 Nita Gora Haribo.
ISKCON founder Acharya BBD founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Pradika Acharya Ashtota Shata Shri Srimati Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Nama Acharya Srila Haridasa Thakur ki jai. Prime se Koho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Brajabhumi Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Navadvipa Mayapur Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Shri Ayodhya Dham ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Yamuna Mai ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Samavrita Bhaktavinda ki jai. Gaura Premanande Hari. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glory to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Pela dela dahaine. Hiranyakashi purvasaha. Silatanka nakhalaye. Ito Narshima Parato Narshima. Yato yato yami tato Narshima. Bahir Narshima Hirde Narshinga. Narasimha Madim Sharanam Parpadin. Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shinga. Dalita Hiranyakashipur Tanu Bringa. Keshavadhirta Narahari Rupa जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे। केशवधीरता नरहरि रूपा, जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे। जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंहा, जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंहा, लक्ष्मी नरसिंहा, जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंहा। जयो प्रहलाद महाराज, जयो प्रहलाद महाराज, प्रहलाद महाराज, जयो प्रहलाद महाराज। जयो जयो प्रभुपाद, 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 जयो जयो प्रभुपाद। लक्ष्मी नरसिम्हा भगवान की जय, प्रहलाद महाराज की जय, गौर प्रमानंदे।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो एई अभिलाषी राधा कृष्णा सेवा राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो एई अभिलाषी राधा जे तुम्हारा शरण लोय तारा वंचा पूर्ण हो जे तुम्हारा शरण लोय तारा वंचा कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावनवासी कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियो बास मोराए नयने हेरिबो सदा युगल रूप राशि नयने हेरिबो सदा युगल रूप এই নিবেদন ধর সখীর অনুগত করো सेवा अधिकार दिए दीन हासी सेवा अधिकार दिए निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दास कोए नमो रहो कृष्ण दास को नमो रहो श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदाए नवासी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदाए नवासी राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदाए नवासी तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे कानि च पापानि कानि च क्षन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani. Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jai Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda, Jayo, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo.
Oh, Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow down before you again and again. My desire is in the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wish fulfilled. Bestow mercy upon him and make him a resident of Vrindavana. My desire is also grant me a residence in the precious groves of Shri Vrindavana town. Thus within my vision I shall always behold the beautiful paths of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow the Karha Danso's virgin. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim in the love of Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulasi Maharani ki jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their life for the propagation of holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the name of the demigods and Lord Shiva or Brahma to be equal to independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Veda literature or literature pursuing the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities in the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritual activities, offering the Vedas as fruitive activities, karma, kanda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glory of the holy name. Then, to know the complete faith in the chanting holy names, and to maintain material attachments in understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also necessary in inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses. In order to achieve desired success, Krishna, Prema. Now let us have most humble obeisances and all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as high trees who can fulfill to everyone. And they are full of compassion for fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Jeto Darpana Marjanam Pavamahadavakni Nirvapanam Shriya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purunaramita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnapanam Paravijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha Eta Deshi Tavakripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudeva Midisham Iha Janina Nurakaha Trinatapi Sunijena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sata Harihi Na Thanam, Na Janam, Na Sundarim, Kavitam Va Jagadisha Kamaye, Mama Jammani Jamanishvare, Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tavai, Ayinanda Tanuja Kinkaram, Patitam Mam Vishame Pavam Buddha, Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja, Stita Duri Satesham Vichintaya, Nayanam Kalatashuru Taraya, Vatanam Kadgata Rudaya Kira, Pulakai Nichitam Vapurkada Tavanama Grahane Pavishati Yuga Itam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Ashirishava Padratam Pinnastumam Ardarshanam Marmahatam Karotuva Yatha Tatha Va Vidatatu Lampato Mat Prananatas Se Eva Na Paraha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes fire of conditional life for repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays and banishing moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases ocean transcendental bliss, and it was fully taste the nectar for which always anxious. All benedict human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names are Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names have vested all your transcendental energies. They are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out kindness enables us to easily approach you by holy names, but I am so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son Hamarjananda, I am your eternal servant. Yet somehow I fall into the ocean, birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me at one atom to your lotus feet. Oh, Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, or the hairs of my body stand and a recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling of separation becomes a moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and shall remain so he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally.
Chaitanya Siksastakam ki jai. Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvacharya Visesha. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Soyam Rupa Gadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachadate Shatarini Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shri Varshavani Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhavin Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaurakarna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Mutaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Pasiddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaurakishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Pujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhumistvam Nirdishta Sajana Priya Vaishnava Savabhoma Shri Jagannataya Te Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhishcha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Vadayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratise Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabandho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madanamo Hano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpajamadha Srimad Ratnakara Simhasanastito Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Pristali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Sriman Rasa Rasarampi Vamsivata Tathastitaha Karsham Vinusaner Gopir Gopinatha Shriyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Dada Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasat Masukha Paviksha Lakshariteshu Surabhira Vipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahmasevyamana Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venum Kanantam Aravinda Talaya Taksham Parharvatam Samasitam Pudasundarangam Gantarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chantakala Savanamare Vamshi Ranankadam Panayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tripanga Lalitam Yataprakasham Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Chakanti Ananda Chimmaya Sadujala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achotam Anadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durlapam Adurlapam Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Shatavatsara Sampragamyu Vayuratapi Manaso Muni Pangavanam Sopyasti Yaprapada Simya Vichinta Tattve Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Ekopya Sora Chaitum Jagatanta Kotim Yachakti Rasti Jagatanta Chayayatanta Antantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Pavitatiyo Manujastateva Samprapya Rupa Mihimasana Yana Bhusha Suktaryam Eva Nikama Pratitastu Vanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Patibhavita Bhistabhiya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasa Kilatma Bhuto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadeva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murtishu Kalanyamena Tishtam Nanavataram Makaro Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramapamam Yo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Brahmasmita ki jai. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful, transcendent, spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamsundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universe as both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. Go.
He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him and is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe, at one and at the same time. Such is the primal Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primal Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas, by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm Goloka with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confident Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shamsundara, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primal Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrisimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portion.
Shri Brahma Smita Ki Jai. Glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya yato niviyad itaratas charte suabhigyaswarat tene brahma hidaya adikavaye muyanti atsurayaha tejo varimidam vinimayo yachachi sargo masha damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. Therefore, I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharma pojita kaitravocha nirmatsaranam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapo trayon mulanam. Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparir Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Virudyate Cha Kriti Bihi Sususubhistakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam. Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam aho muhur aho raska bhuvibhavukaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice is already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Granthraja Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, we're reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, verse number 33. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Satarani Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Bhakti-Gadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, Chapter 3, Canto 3, Chapter 9, text number 33. Yadarahitam atmanam bhutendriya gunasaya swarupena mayopetam pasyam swarajyam richati yada, when rahitam, freed from atmanam, self, bhuta, material elements, indriya, material senses, guna asaya, under the influence of the material modes of nature,
under the influence of the material modes of
swarupena,
Swarupena,
in pure existence,
in pure existence,
maya,
Maya,
by me,
by me,
upetam,
Upetam,
approaching,
approaching,
pasyan,
Pashyan,
by seeing,
by seeing,
swara,
Swara,
swarajyam,
Swarajyam,
spiritual kingdom,
spiritual kingdom,
richati,
richly
enjoy.
enjoy.
Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When you are free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, and your senses are free from all influences of the modes of material nature, you will realize your pure form in my association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness. So this is a discussion that's going on between Lord Krishna and Brahma. Brahma is begging the Lord, please don't let me get puffed up, because I'm always going to be dealing with material nature. Please let me always remain your servant and very humble, so I can do this gigantic task of secondary creation of the material world. So Brahma is praying and praying, please don't let me fall into Maya, basically. And I just want to be your servant, and I want to do the service purely. And I need your help. So after Brahma praying and saying so many wonderful things, now Krishna is speaking directly to Brahma and instructing him how he can do this. So this is an example of guru and disciple. Brahma is the disciple, and Krishna is the supreme original guru. And this is what's recommended in Bhagavad Gita. Tatvidi paripratena paripasnena sevaya upadekshami te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. That, hey Arjuna, you must approach a bona fide guru with three attitudes: pranipat, paripasnena, and sevaya. Humility and asking significant questions, and these questions, as Brahma is asking, were very significant, and now the answers are coming, which are hugely significant. And offering service. So three things: humility, asking important questions, and offering service. That creates the positive atmosphere or environment in which the disciple has many questions. Why am I in this world? What's the purpose of life? Who is God? Is it possible to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death? All these questions, there's thousands of questions that we should have. And the person that can answer these questions is bona fide guru and gurus, shiksha and diksha gurus. They're qualified because they've spent their lives on studying this and practicing it. Studying is not enough, you have to practice. Practice makes perfect, not being a bookworm makes perfect. So, now, this verse says again, I'll read it one more time. When you are free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, and when your senses are free from all influences of the modes of material nature, you will realize your pure form in my association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness. So this is an explanation of how we can attain perfection in human life. So in the purport, if someone wants to read the purport, we'll go slowly.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that a person whose only desire is to render transcendental loving service to the Lord is a free person in any condition of material existence. That service attitude is the Swarupa, or real form of the living entity.
See, now there's a big statement there, just in the first couple lines. That service attitude is the Swarupa, or the real form of the living entity. That's who we really are. If you want to know who you are, this is explaining it. We are the eternal servant of Krishna. Jivera Swarupahaya Krishna Nitya Das. The Jiva, or the individual living entity, real position or real identity, Swarupa, is to be the eternal servant of Krishna. So that's why that service attitude is the Swarupa, or real form of the living entity. Now, unless we actually get involved in practical devotional service for Krishna, we never really achieve any happiness or self-satisfaction. We're always searching, but we never really find what we want, because what we want is something that is based on Maya. But if it's something based on Krishna, then we actually get what we want. We get eternal service to Krishna and liberation from the cycle of birth and death. We have to think about this seriously. This is the fundamental question of life. Who am I? And unless we can answer that question correctly, we'll remain confused throughout life, and we'll engage in all kinds of mundane activities that just makes us more frustrated. Go ahead.
Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita also confirms that statement. This statement by declaring that a real spiritual form of the living entity is eternal servitorship to the Supreme Lord. The Mayavada school shudders at the thought of a service attitude in the living entity, not knowing that in the transcendental world, the service of the Lord is based on transcendental love.
Yeah, Mayavadis have no conception of love.
Transcendental loving
They're only interested in their own salvation. Whereas a devotee, because they love Guru and Krishna, or Prabhupada and Krishna, they're ready to sacrifice everything in their life to spread Krishna consciousness. Isn't that what we're doing? When you go in Sankirtan, you're trying to spread Krishna consciousness. When you speak to someone and begin to tell them about Bhagavad Gita, you're trying to teach them about Krishna, who Krishna is, and how to approach Krishna. This is who we really are. We're the eternal servant of the Lord. By avoiding that, we go around in circles and never really get anywhere. And we get frustrated and eventually confused. Without having this knowledge of servitorship to Lord Krishna, under the direction of bona fide Guru, we will make many mistakes in our lives and end up very frustrated. Ending up frustrated is like defeat in one's life. So we don't want to get into a position like that. Okay, go ahead.
Transcendental loving service is never to be compared to the forced service of material world. In the material world, even if one is under the conception that he is no one's servant, he is still the servant of servant of his senses, under the dictation of the material modes.
So the senses are influenced by the modes of material nature. So if you see a handsome man or you see a pretty girl, your senses get agitated. Or if you see a really nice car, or you see some possibility of a vacation somewhere, you get attracted to those things. So now, even if we're not, let's say, controlled by a specific person, we're being controlled by the modes of material nature on our senses. And as long as we don't use the senses in Krishna's service, we use them in either selfish goodness or selfish passion or selfish ignorance. These are three universal forces: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And they're controlled by Brahma, Vishnu, and Lord Shiva. So there's no way that we can get away from them. The only way we can get away from them or become free of them is by surrendering to bona fide Guru and Krishna. Then, by practicing Krishna consciousness, practical devotional service, we become free of the influence of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and we come to the transcendental level of goodness. Go ahead.
So Maharaj, I have one question. Like, after realizing Super Soul, is there a chance for the living entity to get puffed up and take the things for granted and again fall down?
You can fall down at any time. If you're not attentive. Attentive means you're paying attention to the details of Krishna consciousness. Waking up early, taking rest early, waking up early, bathing, putting on clean clothes. All these things are details, but if you follow them strictly, then you will not fall down. If you begin to skip things and ignore things and not be attentive, then you fall down. As soon as our mind starts wandering and we're wasting time, you can waste time in many different ways, then it's possible to fall down because you're not being attentive to the details of Krishna consciousness. Just like a mother, she can't forget to feed her baby. Mothers who forget to feed the baby or change the diaper or things like that, they're not being attentive. But if they're a good mother, they don't miss any opportunity for the cleanliness and the safety of the baby, you see. So she can't afford to be inattentive. In the same way, we cannot, as devotees, be inattentive once, especially after we're initiated. We have to pay attention to all the details of Krishna consciousness. At the same time, we have to do our other duties. If you're married, you have children, your wife or your husband, you have many things that you have to do. So if you learn to pay attention to all the details of Krishna consciousness, you'll also be able to pay attention to all the other duties that you have to do to maintain yourself, your job, maintain good relationship with your children, your family, your wife, etc. See, so that attentiveness, that ability to focus on the details of your responsibilities, that's who you are. And if you're always Mr. Late, Mr. I forgot this, Mr. I forgot that, then you're going to fall down. You're not going to be able to do all these duties properly. You probably see that in your workplace also. Sometimes there are workers, although they have a lot of responsibilities, they have to do the deliverables, something happens in their life and they're not doing it. What happens to them? You tell me. What happens to them? Huh? They get fired. They're thrown out. They get their, let's say, suspension. So, just like you have to pay attention to your duties at work, on the workplace, when you get initiated, you have to pay attention to the duties that you promised. Now, what are those duties? 8 things. 4 things you should never do, 4 things you should always do. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. Always chant 16 minimum good rounds every day. Take only prasadam that's been offered with love and devotion to Krishna. Hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and come to the temple regularly to do seva or service in the association of devotees. So those are 4 things you should never do, 4 things you should always do. This is attentiveness. When you very attentively avoid those 4 things that you should never do, and very attentively do those 4 things you should always do, then you're going to be successful. Then you're not going to fall down. You're going to be protected by Krishna himself. But as soon as we begin to be negligent, then we come under the control of Maya. Now, who do you want to be controlled by, Maya or Krishna? You make your decision. Be inattentive, you'll be controlled by Maya, and you'll be miserable. Yeah, there'll be some successes and there'll be some failures, and ultimately everything's going to be a failure because we get old, we get sick, and we die. So why not understand the value of giving up these 4 self-destructive behaviors: meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, and in general, inattentiveness, always being sidetracked by this thing or that thing, and hearing politics and hearing sports and hearing this nonsense and that nonsense. We should always be hearing Krishna Katha. And Krishna Katha is unlimited. Okay, go ahead.
Factually, no one is master here in the material world, and therefore the servants of the senses have a very bad experience of servitude. They shudder at the thought of service because they have no knowledge of the transcendental position. In transcendental loving service, the servitor is as free as the Lord.
Now remember that. When you're engaged in transcendental loving service for Krishna, you get as free as the Lord. Free as the Lord. That means you're not under the influence of Maya anymore. You're completely free. And that's what people want. They want freedom. They're willing to risk their lives to have freedom, right? Just the revolution in the 13 states, almost 300 years ago. People were fighting for freedom from British hegemony, British control. They said, no taxation without representation. So in other words, they were being taxed by England on the liquor and this thing and that thing, and without having any say. So that was one slogan: no taxation without representation. Right? So they wanted to have their own representative legal body to make laws and not be subject to the whimsical laws of the British Empire, which was to exploit the new territories that they had developed. So you see, and then eventually there was this war, George Washington, etc., and then by some type of miracle, Washington won. It wasn't easy because most people did not support Washington. You might think, oh, everybody was on his side. No, they weren't. A lot of people supported the British. They were satisfied living under the British. So if you read American history, you'll see it was like a miracle that Washington won the war. And it wasn't over. The British invaded the United States several times, or at least once, to try and overthrow the government. So it wasn't an easy thing. It took about 20, 30, 40 years for the British to give up and stop harassing the new colonies. So you see, this desire for freedom, here you look what he's saying here. He says that transcendental loving service is never to be compared to the forced service of the material world. In the material world, even if one is under the conception that he is no one's servant, he is still the servant of his senses, under the dictation of the material modes. Fact, therefore, the servants of the senses have a very bad experience of servitude. They shudder at the thought of service because they have no knowledge of the transcendental position. In transcendental loving service, the servitor, meaning the devotee, is as free as the Lord. Think about that. As free as the Lord. Krishna can do anything. And you can attain a position like that, to be as free as the Lord. The Lord is Swarat, or fully independent, and the servant is also fully independent, or Swarat, in the spiritual atmosphere, because there is no forced service. Go ahead.
There, the transcendental loving service is due to spontaneous love. A reflected glimpse of such service is experienced in the service of the mother unto the son, the friend's service unto the friend, or the wife's service unto the husband. These reflections of service by friends, parents, wives are not forced, but are due only to love.
And when the love stops, so does the service stop. So it's not a guaranteed all lifetime thing. People get angry, people feel hurt. Sometimes words are said that hurt people, and they stop wanting to serve. That's not the case in the spiritual world, but go ahead.
Here in this material world, however, the loving service is only a reflection. The real service or service in Swarupa is present in the transcendental world in association with the Lord. The very same service in transcendental love can be practiced in devotion here.
So that means we can attain the same Swarupa, or freedom of the soul, as in the spiritual world, even here in the material world, by the practice of devotional service with love for Krishna. So it's not like, oh, I have to go back to Godhead, then I will experience this. No, you can experience it now. this complete freedom to, because of love for Krishna and Guru. Go ahead.
This verse is also applicable to the Jnani school. The enlightened Jnani, when free from all material contaminations, namely the gross and subtle bodies together with the senses of material modes of nature, is placed in the Supreme and is thus liberated from the material bondage. The jnanis and the devotees are actually in agreement up to the point of liberation from material contamination. But whereas jnanis remain pacified on the platform of simple understanding, the devotees further spiritual advancement in loving service. The devotees develop a spiritual individuality in their spontaneous service attitude, which is enhanced on and on up to the point of Madhuri Rasa, or transcendental loving service reciprocated between the lover and the beloved.
So there's always progressiveness in Krishna consciousness, not necessarily in the jnanis, although they can attain a very high level, but they have their limits. Whereas for the devotees, there are no limits. Why? Because they don't limit their service. They just increase their service and their loving attitude. Okay, so this gives a little difference. This explains a little difference between the jnanis and the yogis, or not jnanis and devotees. Okay, so I just want to go back now. Let's read, somebody read the 6th chapter, 29th and 30th verse. We didn't finish this yet, previous day. 6th chapter, 29th and 30th verse of Bhagavad Gita.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Bhagavad Gita 6.29. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Purport: a Krishna-conscious yogi is the perfect seer because he sees Krishna, the Supreme, situated in everyone's heart at Supersoul, Paramatma, as Supersoul. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridayadeshe Arjuna Tishtati. The Lord in his Paramatma feature is situated within both the heart of the dog and that of a Brahmana. The perfect yogi knows that the Lord is eternally transcendental and is not materially affected by his presence in either a dog or a Brahmana. That is the supreme neutrality of the Lord. The individual soul is also situated in the individual heart, but he is not present in all hearts. That is the distinction between the individual soul and the super soul. One who is not factually in the practice of yoga cannot see so clearly. A Krishna conscious person can see Krishna in the heart of both the believer and the non-believer. In the Smriti, Sattvata Tantra 3.49, this is confirmed as follows. Atatattvachcha matravad atmahi paramo hari. The Lord, being the source of all beings, is like the mother and the maintainer. As the mother is neutral to all different kinds of children, the Supreme Father or Mother is also. Consequently, the Super Soul is always in every living being. Outwardly, also, every living being is situated in the energy of the Lord. As will be explained in the 7th chapter, the Lord has primarily two energies, the spiritual or superior and the material or inferior. The living entity, although part of the superior energy, is conditioned by the inferior energy. The living entity is always in the Lord's energy. Every living entity is situated in him in one way or another. The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations according to the results of fruitive work, is all
In all circumstances.
in all circumstances remain the servants of God. While in the material energy, the living entity serves the material senses, and while in the spiritual energy, he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, the living entity is the servant of God. This vision of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness.
Okay, so now this requires thinking about what's being said. Prabhupada is giving examples to try and explain it in terms of things that we know. In other words, to understand something we don't know, we can use examples of things that we do know that will help us understand what we don't know. So, is there such a thing as pure devotion in the material world? Well, the closest thing is a serious mother's love and care for a child. She can't give up doing that service because there's love. Now, is it pure love? Maybe not. Maybe not. But there is some love there, and because that she feels obliged to regularly clean the child, feed the child, comfort the child, and take care of the child in every way possible, because the child is completely dependent on the mother. Now, there are mothers that ignore the children. You know, they're like basically criminals. But normally, motherhood arouses these type of absolute necessity to protect the child. Okay, so this is not absolute pure love of God, but it gives you a hint from a practical example in the material world that such a thing is possible, because there are mothers who are completely dedicated to protecting their children and serving their children and making the life of the child as peaceful and healthy and happy as possible. Okay, so what's basically being said in this purport? Let's just read the verse again. It says, a true yogi. Yogi means one who is connected to Krishna. That's what yogi or yoga means. You're connected to Krishna through one process or another. A true yogi observes me, meaning Krishna, in all beings, and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the Supreme Lord, everywhere. If you attain this state of understanding the omnipotence and the omnipresence of Krishna in the form of Paramatma, in the heart of every living entity, that's not only human beings, every living entity, and in every atom of the universe, then you'll never be bewildered. And you'll be always in Krishna consciousness. Because then you know not even a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. That means you have become Krishna conscious, when you have such convictions. Did you finish reading?
29 is over, Maharaj.
Right. Okay, so now text 30. For one who sees me everywhere and who sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So if we want to be Krishna conscious, these two verses are very important. We have to accept the existence of Paramatma. We have to accept that Paramatma is in the heart of every living entity and in every atom of the universe. That's why things work. It's not there's none of this, oh, well, it happened by accident and it's going on because of gravity and because of this thing or that thing. That's nonsense. You can't have such organization as we're seeing in this universe by accident. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing organized and perfectly and what you would say predictably functioning for millions and millions and millions of years. And it happened by accident. That's nonsense. Nothing that they do, meaning the scientists and the big industrialists and so forth, is happening by accident. It's all intelligence driven. They have these PhDs and they have these engineers and they have these mechanical engineers, and they're all working together, putting things together. Just to put a 22-pound Sputnik in an orbit for 22 days, it took the Russians millions and millions of dollars and the help of 4 or 5 major organizations in their country to put that 22-pound Sputnik in the sky for about 2.5 weeks. It didn't happen by accident, let's put it like that, right? So to put a little Sputnik into space for 22 days, they spent millions and millions of dollars, and they had hundreds and maybe even thousands of people working on it to get it done. And they beat the Americans, right? The Americans were shocked when they saw the Russians were able to do that. Now, let's just imagine the space module, all these things. None of that happened by accident. But yet they're saying all these gigantic planets, they're moving in perfect orbits. It all happened by accident. This is crazy stuff. They're making these things up, and people are accepting it, but it doesn't make sense. Where everything in this world, like these carpets and the electricity and the lights and the building and the different decorations we have, none of this happened by accident. It was all intelligence driven. The car you drive, it didn't happen by accident. It's all intelligence driven. The house you're living in, it didn't happen by accident. It's all intelligence driven. Everything in this world, in the material world that you're seeing, the airplanes, the trains, the submarines, the cars, the houses, the buildings, that's all intelligence driven. But then when they talk about the universe, the planets in perfect orbits, the sun giving out huge amount of energy every day for millions and billions of years, it all happened by accident. That's crazy. There's no rhyme or reason to make a statement like that when everything in their life is being intelligence driven, you see. So this is the blindness of the atheists, and it's because of hatred. They hate God. They hate the concept of God. They hate the idea that there's one person who's smarter than everybody else and is more powerful than anyone else. They hate that. They want to be that person, or they want to be that company or whatever that's greater than everyone else, right? Just like you see, there's tremendous competition between Facebook and Microsoft and Twitter and this one and that one. They're all trying to destroy each other, right? They want their technology, they want their knowledge, they want their system to be all perfect, you know. And Amazon, Oracle, all those companies, they're fighting like anything to destroy the other companies. Right? But that's not reality. Reality is that this harmony that we see in nature and the harmony that we see in predictability of nature, it's all organized. And the organizer is the Supersoul. And under the Supersoul is Brahma. So we're hearing this, and this verse says, "For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me." In other words, there's nothing independent of Krishna. "I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me." So now you can read the purport to that verse.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness certainly sees Lord Krishna everywhere, and he sees everything in Krishna. Such a person may appear to see all separate manifestations of the material nature, but in each and every instance he is conscious of Krishna, knowing that everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy. Nothing can exist without Krishna, and Krishna is the Lord of everything.
So that should be our motto. Nothing can exist without Krishna, and Krishna is the Lord of everything. Go ahead.
This is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the development of love of Krishna, a position transcendental even to material liberation. At this stage of Krishna consciousness, beyond self-realization, the devotee becomes one with Krishna in the sense that Krishna becomes everything for the devotee, and the devotee becomes full in loving Krishna. An intimate relationship between the Lord and the devotee then exists. In that stage, the living entity can never be annihilated, nor is the personality of Godhead ever out of the sight of the devotee. To merge in Krishna is spiritual annihilation. A devotee takes no such risk. It is stated in the Brahma Samhita 5.38, Premanjana churida bhakti vilocanena shanta sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam syama sundaram achindya guna swarupam govindamadi purusham tam aham bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee, whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shyama Sundara, situated within the heart of the devotee. At this stage, Lord Krishna never disappears from the sight of the devotee, nor does the devotee ever lose sight of the Lord. In the case of a yogi who sees the Lord as Paramatma within the heart, the same applies. Such a yogi turns into a pure devotee and cannot bear to live for a moment without seeing the Lord within himself.
Okay, now you see these two verses are extremely, I would say, edifying. They instruct us. If you begin to see how Krishna is present everywhere, and nothing is independent of the Lord, everything is dependent on the Lord, you're seeing things correctly. So, how many people are seeing things correctly in this world? 1%, maybe 2%. That's about it. Most people believe that this universe started with, the Big Bang or the string theory or this theory or that theory, and it happened without any God, or any superhuman being or any supreme personality of Godhead. And it's going on all by accident, by infinite number of permutations and combinations. And these explanations are insane. You have to be insane to even believe it. But yet it's being taught like science. And people are being misled, and it's ruining their lives. When you have misinformation, that means you'll never really achieve your goal in life. What is the goal everyone wants? Freedom. Freedom from birth, death, old age, and disease. Freedom from all the miseries of the material world. They'll never be able to reach it with such false ideas. This is an evil administration of collusion of the scientists, philosophers, and all different types of educational institutions and so forth, to ruin the lives of people and keep them from attaining the real goal of life, and that is to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death and go back to Godhead. So we have to think seriously about this. This is very serious question. Who am I? Does God actually exist? Who is this God? Well, there's plenty of information if you're interested to know. Plenty of information. And it's all bona fide information. So we have to make up that decision in our life. I'm not going to waste my time anymore with speculation. I'm going to hear and learn every day more and more about who Krishna is, what my relationship with Krishna is, how I can function in that relationship, and what is the spiritual world. Nowhere else can you get that information except in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. There's very little information about that in the Bible and the Quran. Very, very little. There's some, but very little. But in Bhagavad Gita, and especially Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a huge amount of information about the spiritual world, about God, about what's going on in the spiritual world. This is the only literature in which you can find this information. We don't realize how powerful the Bhagavad Gita is. We'll stop right there. Are there any questions? You see, these are very serious questions that we should think about. Go ahead.
Maharaj, this is from the yesterday's verse 3.9.32, where the example is given of the fire in wood. The fire kindled in wood is always the same, although the wood may be of different types.
The heat.
Right. So, as I was thinking or meditating on that particular, it realized that is the fire or the warmth in the wood, should we consider that as soul or super soul?
This is just an example.
Like we have...
In every piece of wood, there is the potential of fire. Now, the woods can be different. There's pine, there's spruce, there's walnut, or different types of woods and trees and so forth. But when you set them on, when you add fire to it, then they all give this heat. The heat is the same.
So the question is, the heat is the soul, or is the heat the super soul?
The heat is being compared to the soul.
Soul.
The super soul.
So the spark which ignites that wood is considered as soul.
Okay. you add fire to the wood, and then it catches fire and releases more fire. Okay? So, I mean, no example is going to be 100% perfect. It's just to give you an idea. So just like in wood, there's a potential of fire, and when there's fire, there's heat. Now, will it look the same? Will it smell the same? Maybe not. But it will give you heat. So in the same way, the super soul is present in the heart of every living entity and in every atom of the universe. And that is why things work. And that is why, so if you understand the example of the fire in the wood, then now you can understand the example of the super soul in the heart of every living entity and in every atom. Right? Because that's the energy. The energy is coming from the super soul for everything to work. So the question is how to release that energy. So the example is given of the potential of fire in wood. Right? So now, is that a perfect example? Not exactly, no, but it gives you a general idea. So if you go deep into understanding why the body is functioning, where the energy of the body is coming from, and all these things, you're going to end up with the relationship between Jiva and Paramatma. And if you understand that Paramatma is omnipresent everywhere, then you have faith that simply by being Krishna conscious, you'll achieve all perfection in life. You'll not be misled. You'll think, no, I got to get a PhD in mechanical engineering. Then I will have success in life. No, it's not necessary at all. What's necessary is to understand that Super Soul is present in everything, and that the Super Soul is the cause of all knowledge and all energies. And nothing is independent. Everything is dependent on Krishna. So once you believe that and you function in that way, then you're no longer bewildered by all the different things in the material world, all these theories. This is not a theory, this is fact. The Super Soul is present in every atom of the universe. That's why things work. It's not that it's all happening by accident. It's not true. You can't have predictability, perfect predictability. They can predict exactly when the sun is going to rise in the springtime or in the fall time. Where is that predictability coming from? It's coming from Super Soul. Somebody's controlling it. It's not that it happened by accident. So now you have the answer. The answer is that, as it says here, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. And then how do you see? Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. So when you chant Hare Krishna, and you're just overwhelmed with love for Krishna, and tears of love are flowing from your eyes, that's the pulp that he's talking about here. Anointed with the pulp of love. When those tears come flowing down your face, not because you're miserable, because you're overwhelmed with love for the Lord. And you understand that so many years, so many lifetimes I've wasted, and because of Prabhupada, and because of Krishna speaking the Bhagavad Gita, and because of Srimad Bhagavatam been spoken by Sukadev Goswami and Sukha Goswami and so forth, I'm able to understand these things, and I'm not bewildered anymore. And I'm actually on the track to go back to Godhead, because I'm engaged full time in devotional service. These tears will come from your eyes, tears of joy, not of misery. Because you say, this is only because Prabhupada sacrificed so much to bring this knowledge and spread it all over the world for the benefit of everyone. Now, not everybody's taking advantage of it, but somehow or other, I was very fortunate to see the value of this and not be bewildered anymore and taking all these sidetracks here and there that lead to nowhere. Now I feel completely confident about the future, knowing that I can go back to Godhead. Those are tears of love that flow down the cheek. So, therefore, I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Sham Sundara, situated within the heart of the devotee. So, everything is based on how to see correctly. We've been studying that when we went into those chapters 13 and 15 in Bhagavad Gita. It was all about how to see, right? And this verse, Premanjana Charitata, this is all about how to see correctly. Most people are not seeing correctly, and they're wasting their lives. Absolutely wasting their lives. And they'll take birth again like animals or who knows what, cockroaches, whatever. Why put ourselves in such jeopardy when we have the knowledge? There are 8,400,000 species. We've already gone through 8 million species that come to the human form. And if we don't use this human form to understand Krishna, we go back into that abominable species, right? And it's not what Darwin says. Darwin says that one species eventually becomes another species. That's not true. There's no evidence of that. I read that to you already a couple of days ago, where they say, well, it takes so long to happen that we've never actually seen it, but we know that it happened in the past, and we can't do it now because we don't live long enough, but it'll happen in the future also. This is crazy. That's not science. And they're admitting they've never seen one species turn into another species. They've seen the beak of the finch increase 1 or 2 inches. And they say, well, see, that's an example of, eventually the finch will turn into a parakeet or an eagle or something. No, it's never happened. That was Darwin's speculation that one species will turn into another species. They don't have proof of it. It's never happened. All the species were created, and I read it, 9th chapter, 8th verse. In the purport, Prabhupada says, all the species were created at once in the beginning of creation. Then it's a question of consciousness, which species you're going to get. And there's all kinds of consciousness, right? Some people have sports consciousness, other people have stock market consciousness, and some people have, sex consciousness, and other people have, music consciousness, and this consciousness, and that consciousness, right? All kinds of different consciousness. You see, you have these crazy men. Their consciousness is being, taking advantage of little children. There's all these different consciousness in the world today, right? And it's all leading to what? Going back into the animal or plant worm or reptile bodies, and then going again slowly, gradually coming back to the human form after millions of years. So this is all explained in Bhagavad Gita very, very, very completely. There's no other explanation of this anywhere else. So if we take this seriously, we will be successful in this lifetime. Go back to Godhead. Any other question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, there is a saying, familiarity breeds consumption.
Familiarity breeds contempt.
Contempt, yeah. It is true only in material world.
What?
It is true in material world only, or in spirituality also it is true.
Okay, so obviously it's not in the spiritual world, because if even there's a little hint of such a thought, you would fall down from the spiritual world. You wouldn't be able to stay there. In the material world, it's a common thing. Familiarity breeds contempt, which means that when you have a more intimate relationship with someone, you begin to see their faults. And if you don't have any love for that person, then eventually you develop this contempt. Therefore, in the material world, people easily criticize other people. There's a saying in the Bible that says, before you see the splinter in the eye of your neighbor, first take out the log in your eye. There's a verse like that in the Bible. In other words, you see some little fault in someone else and you make a big thing about it. But actually you're not seeing the gigantic fault in your own mind and eye of having such a severe, contempt for another person, when you yourself have a serious problem. So that's why to approach spiritual master, you have to have 3 attitudes. Pranipat, paripasnena sevaya. Humility, asking significant questions, and offering service. Then you create the right atmosphere for serving Guru, and then asking questions and getting proper answers from the Guru. But if you're not humble and you ask foolish questions and not really interested in offering service, then you're not going to go anywhere with the spiritual master. The spiritual master is not going to answer your questions. So, familiarity breeds contempt. Well, there's one example of that. When the devotees were watching the television of the moon landing, and Prabhupada said, I don't think they went there. Some of the devotees said, oh, we just saw it on the television, and Prabhupada is saying they didn't go there. That means Prabhupada is nonsense, and they left the movement. Now we know that Prabhupada was right. They never did go to the moon. Right? So, if you accept a bona fide spiritual master, then you have to be very careful. You should not think that a spiritual master is like an ordinary person. Now, what does that mean? A bona fide spiritual master will only speak on the spiritual subjects and repeat what has already been said originally by Krishna, which has also been repeated by the acharyas, and now he is also saying the same thing. That's a bona fide spiritual master. And you can check to see if that's true, because what does a spiritual master do? He teaches you Bhagavad Gita. He teaches you Srimad Bhagavatam. So you can double check whatever he says. If he contradicts anything in Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, he's not a spiritual master. So you have this triangle of verification. Krishna's words, the Acharya's words, present Guru's words. If the present Guru's words are the same as the Acharya's words, which are the same as Krishna's words, you close the triangle, you know it's true. If you can't close the triangle because the Guru says something different than what the Acharyas have said or what Krishna has said, then there's a incomplete triangle. Therefore, you cannot accept what's being said. You have to understand it's nonsense. So, as a disciple, the minimum qualification you have to have is to know if there is deviation from Shastra. And how do you know that? By coming to class regularly. Otherwise, you're not a bona fide shishya if you cannot recognize deviation from Shastra. Okay? So there's familiarity breeds contempt. We should never be too familiar. In other words, we think, oh, well, Prabhupada was not able to stand up and I had to help him move and he's completely dependent on me. No, that's not the way to think. Maybe Prabhupada was weak or he was sick or whatever, but he was completely Krishna conscious. And you can see it right up to the moment he's dying. He's still translating Bhagavad Gita. You can see it on the internet. So, and his purports were, those last purports are very profound. Very, very profound. So his mind was completely clear about, serving Krishna. The body was failing him, but not his conviction of Krishna consciousness. So he was able to give purports right up to the moment of death. So if we have a bodily concept of a person, we will make mistakes, and we could easily fall into the trap of familiarity breeds contempt. But if we see the presence of the Supersoul, and we see the adherence to Shastric evidence always, and we see tremendous self-control and mercy, then criticizing that person would be an offense, aparad. So you have to be very careful in the association of genuine devotees, not to become puffed up and then create some familiarity breeds contempt. It's very dangerous. Okay?
Thank you.
If that happens in the material spiritual, you fall down immediately. Immediately you would fall down. So therefore we can say clearly it doesn't happen in the spiritual world because you will fall down right away. Go ahead.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, we'll stop right there. Questions? Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
श्री गुरु चरण पद्मा केवल भक्ति सद्मा श्री बंदो मुई सावधान मोते बंदो मुई बंदो मुई सावधान मोते बंदो मुई सावधान मोते जहर प्रसादे भाई ए भव तोरिया जाए जहर तोरिया कृष्ण प्राप्ति होए जहा होइते कृष्ण प्राप्ति हो गुरुमुख पद्मा वाक्य चिते ते कोरिया क्या गुरुमुख पद्मा रिया क्या और ना कोरी हो मोने आशा और ना कोरी हो मोने आशा श्री गुरु चरणे रति ऐसे उत्तम गति श्री गुरु चरणे रति जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा जे प्रसादे सर्व आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जाह हुईते अविद्या विनाश जते वेद गाय जहर चरितो दे गाय चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु लोकनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना लोकेरा जीवाना लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना हा हा प्रभु कोरो दया देह मोरे पर पदचया प्रभु कुरु दया देहो मोरे पदचया प्रभु कुरु दया देहो मोरे पदचया प्रभु कुरु दया देहो मोरे पदचया एबे जाज गुशु त्रिभुवाना एबे जाज गुशु त्रिभुवाना शीला प्रभु पादो इलो शरणा प्रभु पादो इलो शरणा जय प्रभु पादा 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 जय गुरुदेवा 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 नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमः भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे नमस्ते निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण जय अद्वैत गदाधर हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Tai Gaur Hari 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 Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari.
His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Sri Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai, Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Sankunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Maya Pradam ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanand. All glories to the Assembled Guru. All glories to the Assembled Guru. All glories to the Assembled Guru. Glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana ki jai. Namaste. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotion. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my conscience purified by the words emanating from his lotus feet. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection, fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. From him, ecstatic praise, by him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic literature sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, and Lord of the master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of the lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of the lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana ki jai. Homework is, first of all, understand the difference between what Darwin said and what Shastra says. Shastra says that all the different species were created at once in the beginning of time, the beginning of material creation. And after that, you look up 9th chapter, 8th verse. Darwin says that one species gradually turns into another species over a long period of time. Now, has anyone ever seen this? One species turning into another species? That's the question. And you'll see that it's not true. The right, well, we don't live long enough to see it, but we know it happened. So they don't know it happened. That's not science. We don't live long enough to see it. And then they'll say, well, there's been experiments done on fruit flies, and it looks like they changed their species. It's a bunch of nonsense also. So look up, where is the proof that one species turned into another species? And you'll see there's no proof of that at all. First of all, let me just make sure I didn't give you the wrong reference. Ninth chapter, 8th verse. Now, as far as the living entities are concerned, they're impregnated into this material nature, and as a result of their past deeds, they take different positions. Thus, the activities of this material world begin. The activities of the different species of living beings are begun from the very moment of the creation. It is not that all is evolved. So that's what Darwin is saying. All the species evolved over time. In his purport to 9th chapter, 8th verse, Bhagavad Gita is saying that the different species of life are created immediately along with the universe. So when Brahma creates, when Krishna gives Brahma the knowledge and creates all the living entities, it happens all at once. It doesn't happen one species becomes another species becomes another species. The different species of life are created immediately along with the universe. Men, animals, beasts, birds, everything is simultaneously created. Because whatever desires the living entities had at the last annihilation are again manifested. It is clearly indicated here by the word of a sum that the living entities have nothing to do with this process. Yeah, there's no such thing as that one species evolves into another species. The state of being in their past life, in the past creation, is simply manifested again. And all this is done simply by His will in Krishna. This is the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of God. And after creating different species of life, He has no connection with them. The creation takes place to accommodate the inclination of the various living entities, and so the Lord does not become involved. Okay. So that's what Bhagavad Gita and Krishna is saying. Now the question is, look up where, that's all right, they can hear me. Look up what the scientists are saying, how one species becomes another species. And see if they've ever did an experiment that actually showed that. And you'll see that it's never happened. They'll make something up about fruit flies, things like that, but it's not. The finch, yeah. Yeah, the beak increased 1 inch, so that it shows that it's gradually going to become a different species. So, yeah, now you do your homework, because you have to understand this. You have to be able to explain this to people. Science is observation, experimentation, theory. They never did the experiment. They don't live long enough to do the experiment, seeing one species become another species. And it doesn't really happen. Right? So you see, it's a hoax. But yet, your children are being taught this nonsense. They've never stopped teaching Darwinism. Is that right? Yeah, of course. It's the last area of their lying, and it's gonna break down soon. Okay, so that's your homework. Hare Krishna.